Hello, welcome to the lecture, students. So, students, as we know that we had started the static GK part of the modern history, and we had covered the Governor General of Bengal, the Governor General of India, and now we have started the Viceroy of India. Okay, so in this lecture, we are going to continue with the Viceroy of India. Okay, so let's start the session. Okay, so before continuing today's session, let me tell you several things for our revision. Okay, so first thing, we know that the Government of India Act 1858 was an turning point in India's modern history. And why I'm saying this? Because this act converted Governor General of India to Viceroy of India. Got it? Second thing, Secretary of States of India was appointed for the first time. Okay. Third point was King or British Crown assume authority over India directly. Okay, so Government of India Act 1858 was a turning point in India's administrative history. Why? Because for the first time, the Governor General of India changed to the Viceroy of India, and the Viceroy of India was directly reporting to the Crown. Okay. Second point was Secretary of States of India was appointed for the first time. He was responsible for maintaining the proper implementation of policy, reporting back to the Crown what is going on in India, okay, and how the Viceroy is performing. These all tasks were carried by Secretary of States of India, okay. And the third point was that the King or the British Crown of the Britain assumed direct authority over India. Okay, before this, the British East India Company was ruling India on behalf of the British Crown or the British government. Okay, but due to Indian Rebellion of 1857, Indian Rebellion of 1857, it was brought to the picture that British East India Company is not capable to manage India. Okay, the same thing was mentioned in the report by Dalhousie, and the same thing was happening on the ground during the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which forced the British Parliament to implement the Government of India Act 1858. Okay, so now we have done a little bit revision. I hope that you have revised all the facts before starting this lecture. Okay, so now we have Lord Mayo. Okay, who was Viceroy of India during 1869 to 1872. Okay, so basically there was a first act which is known as the Indian Forest Act. Got it? Okay, so basically we could say that the Indian Forest Act in 1878 was enacted by the Lord Mayo government. Okay, remember, they enacted the act which was further passed in the 1878. Got it? They were not the first one who implemented this act. Okay, they just enacted it because Lord Mayo's time period was only for 1869 to 1872. Got it? So what was Indian Forest Act? What was the Indian Forest Act? Before understanding the Indian Forest Act, we must understand the lifestyle of India. Lifestyle of India during this time. Okay. So students, this was a time period when India was divided into several categories like the princely states, Okay. Thereafter, the British India. Third point was tribal India. Okay. The princely states are those states which state hadn't been defeated by the British or have signed subsidiary alliances. Okay. So only two types of princely state could sustain on that time. Either the state has not been defeated or has signed subsidiary alliance. Okay. Second one was the British India, the areas occupied by British. Occupied by British. Okay. And the third, which is the tribal India, only for tribal parts. Okay. So various tribes were living in India on that time. Okay. They still live in India even today. Okay. So various tribes were living in India during this part, and they were mainly depend upon forest. They were mainly depend upon forest. So what happened when British came to India? They had a monetized economy. They had an approach of monetized economy, which means earn from everything. Okay. So Lord Mayo had seen that the tribal people were using the forest, which are very resourceful. Okay. And some of these forests are basically lying in the area of British government or in the area where British government had established their rules. Okay. So that's why Lord Mayo wanted to control the activities of these tribal peoples who had their livelihood on forest. Got it? So he enacted the Act of Indian Forest Act during his time period, which was further implemented in 1878. Okay. So the main question is, what was written down in this act? Okay. What is the main provision of this act? The main question is that. So basically, this act divided the forest into three parts. Okay. Reserved forest, protected forest, third one was village forest. Okay. So these were the division which was introduced during Indian Forest Act 1878. So the reserved forest was basically the high quality forest where entry of tribal people was completely prohibited. Okay. Second one was protected forest. Okay. It was forest where tribal people allowed to collect fuel woods, but in limitations. Okay. And the third category, which was the village forest, basically it was totally useless forest where no restrictions are there. Okay. So this was the division introduced by the Indian Forest Act. The first was the reserve forest. The reserve forest was the high quality forest where the high quality of trees, high quality of resources available. This entire area was seized by the British forces. Okay, and in this particular area, no one of the tribal people allowed to come and collect the resources. Okay, this was under direct control of the British government. Got it? The second category, which stands for the protected land or protected forest. The protected forest is the forest where some kind of activities are allowed, such as collecting firewoods and others, but only after obtaining the permit or permission from the government. Okay, failing to which there will be a punishment. Okay, it means that yes, you are allowed to collect the fuel woods and other things from protected forest only, but you are required to obtain a permission from the British government. Okay, and the third category, which was regarded as the village forest, it's basically useless category where no such resources could be found. So this area is free. It means that villagers are allowed to do whatever they want to do in this village forest. Okay, so this was the division and this was the criteria introduced under Indian Forest Act. Okay, now let's move forward. Thereafter, he established the Mayo College at Ajmer, okay, for providing modern education to the Indian nobility. Indian nobility means Indian high class. Okay, because Mayo College was too expensive. Okay, so basically we could say he introduced Mayo College in Ajmer for better education only for the Indian high class or Indian elites or Indian nobility, because the education was too expensive in this particular college. Okay, now let's move forward. Now we have Lord Northbrook, who was there from 1872 to 1876. Okay, so basically Lord Northbrook was famous for famine relief efforts. Okay, during his time there was a great famine introduced in India. Okay, and Lord Northbrook administration focused on famine relief efforts. Okay, and also he introduced public works and relief measures. Got it? So if question directly asks you who was the Viceroy to focused on famine relief. Okay, if the question is that who was the Viceroy to focus on famine relief during 1872 to 76. Okay, so what should be your answer? Your answer should be Lord Northbrook. Lord Northbrook was the answer. Okay. Also, he introduced the Arms Act of 1878. Okay. Basically, what was happening after the Indian Rebellion of 1857? After the Indian Rebellion of 1857, Britishers were in shock. Okay, because this rebellion was of the great magnitude, okay, which completely left the Britishers in shock. Like, how did Indians organize this attack? Okay, and then they found that firearms were headache for the Britishers, because many Indians were holding the firearms and ammunitions on that time. Okay, to curb and to maintain a control over this usage, they introduced Arms Act of 1878. Okay, and who was the Governor General? Lord Northbrook. Okay, so basically we could say we have completed 2 questions here. First question is, who was the viceroy to focus on famine relief during 1872 to 76? The answer is Lord Northbrook. Second thing is, who was the Governor General who enacted the Arms Act of 1878? Again, the answer is Lord Northbrook. Okay, because this act was passed during his period but completely implemented in 1878. Got it? Now let's move forward. Now we have Lord Lytton. Okay, he was the viceroy from 1876 to 1880. Okay, and he was particularly known for Vernacular Press Act. What do you mean by this? Basically, when the Britishers were expanding, okay, on the very similar time, the French were also expanding. Okay, so these were the things. The Britishers were expanding, the French were expanding, also rebellions were happening against Britishers. Okay, so basically you can say too many things were happening at the same time. The Britishers were trying to expand their territory. At the same time, the French were expanding their territory in India also. And the third point is that rebellions were organizing against the Britishers because of their suppressed policy. Okay, and then they found that media is the major source which could manipulate the people against the British India or the Britishers particularly. Okay, so then the Britishers were trying to control the media and they passed several media controlling acts, and out of them the most famous is Vernacular Press Act, which was found during the time period of 1878, same time period when the Arms Act of India was found. Okay, so during the 1878 time period, he introduced Vernacular Press Act. Okay, what do you mean by Vernacular Press Act? Vernacular Press Act. Basically there were two types of language. The vernacular stands for the native language and second language was English. Okay, so basically the English language media sources were excluded. Okay, the English sources of media resources were excluded on terms of seditious nature. Seditious nature, which means that nothing should be printed against government. Okay, so it was the seditious nature. It simply means that Britishers declared the situation of that time as a critical situation, and they said because there is a situational condition prevailing in the country, critical condition basically prevailing in country, so that's why nothing should be printed against the government. Okay, so on behalf of this seditious nature, the English newspaper were excluded because they were supposed not to publish anything against the government. But what about the native newspaper? So basically they said the magistrate or police commissioner had authority to control anything published in the media against government. Okay, so basically Vernacular Press Act controlled the native language newspapers and provided the power to the magistrate or the police commissioner to control the things whichever publishing in the native newspaper against the government. Okay, now let's move forward. Thereafter, we also have a great famine which was prevailing in India during 1876 to 1878. Okay, which led us to the loss of life. Many lives were lost during this time period. Okay, so remember these facts. Now we had the Lord Ripon. Basically, Lord Ripon was the person who repealed Vernacular Press Act. Okay, so the Vernacular Press Act, which was passed by Lord Lytton, was removed by Lord Ripon. Okay, because he had the liberal policies, so that's why he also introduced a Ilbit Bill. Okay, the Ilbit Bill basically aimed to allow Indian judges to try European offenders. Okay, and this was the very controversial bill because it was passing the power to the Indian judges to charge or to try the European offenders. Got it? Thereafter, we had the Lord Dufferin, who was the Viceroy of India from 1884 to 1888. During his time, the Indian National Congress was founded by A.O. Hume, and Y.C. Banerjee. Okay? During 1885. At Gokuldas, Tejpal Sanskrit College, Bombay. Got it? Thereafter, we had the Lord Lansdowne. Okay. Basically, Lord Lansdowne was also engaging in maintenance of buffer zone. Okay, in maintenance of buffer zone. Basically, I had told you that the Russia, or you can say the Russian Empire, was also trying to grow itself during the same time period when India was growing, or you can say when the British India was growing, or the Britishers were growing. Okay. So during this time period, the Russians were approaching towards Afghanistan. So the Britishers were trying to control the Afghanistan government, or made its government as a puppet government, which will not allow Russian Empire to set its roots in India, so that the British Empire would be safe. Okay. So the second Anglo-Afghan War was fought by Lord Lansdowne. Got it? Now let's move forward. He also introduced a new currency system in which rupees were fixed in the ratio of gold standard. Okay, so basically you can say if 2000 crore rupees are printed, then reserved or gold of worth 2000 crores will be maintained. Okay, so this system was introduced by Lord Lansdowne. Okay, thereafter we have the Lord Alling II. During his time period, the plague epidemic was introduced. Okay, mainly in the Bombay. So the question is, who was the Viceroy during plague epidemic of Bombay in 1894 to 1899? What should be the answer? The answer should be Lord Elgin II. Okay, so here we have generated a new question. Now let's move forward. Relief efforts during the 1897 famine. Now you got a more accurate date. It was happening in the 1897. Okay, so Lord Elgin II oversaw relief efforts during the widespread famine of 1897. Okay, as providing assistance to the affected regions. Got it? Now let's move forward. Now we have the Lord Curzon. Basically, he was a person who divided Bengal into two forms, East Bengal and West Bengal. Got it? This East Bengal, after independence, was converted into East Pakistan. Okay, which remained as East Pakistan from 1947 to 1971. Okay, and during the Indo-Pak War, of 1971, East Pakistan was liberated from Pakistan and established as Bangladesh. Got it? So Lord Curzon was the person who divided the Bengal into two areas, East Bengal and the West Bengal. The East Bengal was converted into East Pakistan during 1947 and remained as East Pakistan during or till 1971. In the Indo-Pak War of 1971, the East Pakistan was converted as a Bangladesh. Got it? Construction of historic monuments. He also initiated the restoration and preservation of historical monuments like Taj Mahal. Who restored Taj Mahal? Answer should be Lord Curzon. Okay, so here I have prepared two questions for you. First, who introduced the Bengal division? Lord Curzon. Second, who restored the Taj Mahal? Lord Curzon. Okay. So students, basically we have covered the main and important Viceroy of India during this time. Okay. The last one which is very important is Lord Linlithgow. Lord Linlithgow. Okay. During his time, cabinet mission came to India in which Constitution Assembly was announced. As we know that this Constituent Assembly was responsible for the Constitution of India. Okay. So students, in this lecture, we had finished the Viceroy of India, or you can say the important Viceroy of India from which the direct questions are asked in the examination. Okay. In this next lecture, we will start with the Indian national movements. Till then, just revise the facts so that you will be able to catch up with the facts and figures of upcoming lectures. Okay. Till then, thank you.